6'5", actually I'm going to look over my stats here real quick, just so you have an idea what my HUD is for this video, since I do have some hands on them, and I think they're somewhat accurate in some ways. So the 42 is his call from the big blind, and the 38 is his 3-bet percentage from the big blind. So that means he's playing, so far over 61 hands, 80% of hands out of position. It's just a 61 hand sample, which means only maybe 30 of those hands were actually in his big blind. So I don't put too much weight into that sample size. I'm not going to make the assumption that he actually plays 80% of hands out of position. I'm not going to adjust to him that drastically. But the nice thing about these small sample sizes, when someone's playing 80% of hands out of position over 30 hands, there's no way they're being nitty out of position. Like, there's no way they're playing, there's almost no way they're playing like less than 50% of that hands out of position. So, I'm beginning to adjust to him. I'm folding a few more small blinds than I normally would. I'm probably c-betting and barreling a little bit more than I normally would, mainly because he has so many weak hands in his out of position range, especially if he's 3-betting with that frequency. So I'm not over adjusting based on the frequencies of a very small sample, but I am adjusting away from my readless play gradually. And the more hands that I pick up over him, and the larger my sample size becomes, the more, and the showdowns we get to and all that kind of stuff, the more clear of an idea I'll have of his frequencies, and the more specifically I can adjust. So I see a lot of my students over adjust early based on a few things. It's a gradual adjustments for the most part. So with ace-jack here, I think this is also a spot that a lot of regs have trouble with. Hands like ace-jack, ace-queen, ace-king, when we 3-bet to a size like I do here of 290, I'm going to let that happen. I think it looks really, really standard to a lot of people, right? But one of the big problems is that the 3-bet calling range that the average villain has here is the kind of range that really our hand, it really is going to fare pretty well against our ace-jack, ace-queen, ace-king, especially ace-king. Because so many hands in that calling range aren't dominated by our hands. It's pretty rare villain is going to have any ace-x in his 3-bet calling range here. So his calling range is going to realize its equity really easily on the flop. It's going to be able to continue very well against us post-flop. So with our hands like ace-queen, ace-king, we're going to have a hard time c-betting a lot of these middle-connected kind of boards because they miss our range so hard, so much, and they hit villains' 3-bet calling range so hard. Not that we have to be able to c-bet every board, but what's our better option? Our better option is typically to 3-bet shove all in, 25 big blind stacks and lower. And that is because the average villain is going to min-raise call a bunch of hands that we dominate, and also the average villain doesn't really open that wide of a range from their small blind. So we avoid the situations where they call our 3-bet with hands that realize equity really easily, and we maximize value from hands that will min-raise call a jam, 25, 22 big blinds deep or whatever. So when should we have a non-all-in 3-bet with these kind of hands? And like I've been saying, I actually think ace-jack is better than ace-king for non-all-in 3-bet because there's more queen-jack, jack-10, jack-9 kind of stuff in the 3-bet calling range that we do dominate. So I don't want to say this is like totally cut and dry here, and I could see an argument for it either way. And I don't mean to ramble too much here, but I do think this is like the kind of thing that is just like theoretically something that a lot of people screw up on. So when should we 3-bet to a not all-in size with these kind of hands at 21, 22 to 25 big blind stacks? On lock we're 30 big blinds, but I'm kind of talking in terms of the star structure for the most part, just because I think most of you guys are stars players. We should 3-bet to a not all-in size versus a thinking player, or really anyone, if we think that, or if we have a pretty good idea that they're going to 4-bet shove a wider range than they would min-raise call. So if they're going to min raise call, you know, king, queen, ace six, ace seven, all these hands, or excuse me, if they're going to 4-bet shove those kind of hands, but they wouldn't min raise call them, then there's more value in allowing villain to think he has fold equity and 3-bet our ace jack and ace king, ace queen to a not all in size. So this particular villain is only opening 57% of hands. So that means that his overall opening range is going to contain a ton of hands that can continue versus the 3-bet. But I do think that he's pretty spazzy and can definitely jam ace X over top of me. Probably any of his ace X. I think someone with that high of a 3-bet percentage is probably capable of that. So I think a not all in size with really any of my hands, aside from small pairs and some of my weaker ace X for sure, is going to be best. Because I think he's going to be jamming over me a lot more than he would min raise call. So I'm losing my voice now after rambling there for so long. But I do think it's pretty interesting, and we can definitely move on now. So